right, so review for The Long Goodbye, 1973. Robert Altman movie. Private Eye Philip Marlowe helps friend Terry Lennox out of a jam and is implicated in his wife Sylvia's murder. He is also hired by Eileen Wade to locate her dipsomaniac husband Roger, who frequently disappears when he wants to dry out. This is a movie I've heard a lot of good things about. I think Tarantino's a really big fan of this movie. I do like Elliot Gould. He's in a movie that I think a better movie called The Silent Partner. A few years after this, I think it's 78. Movie I reviewed a few weeks ago. Really like that movie. Huge fan of that movie. This, not as much as that movie, but I did like it. Robert Altman's an interesting director. He died in 2006. Like, he's directed Nashville, Gosford Park, The Player. I'm not sure if I think I reviewed The Player on this channel. I like The Player more, but he's got this kind of weird tone in a lot of his movies. It seems like it follows a main character, and they're usually kind of floating their way through the script. It's I don't know. It's a very distinct tone. He did Popeye. Oh, that movie. I watched some of Nashville and just couldn't get into it. That movie's kind of long too, I think. But even in that movie, it's like, yeah, that movie's 2 hours and 40 minutes. But in that movie, it's like it follows a couple different characters, and they're just kind of floating their way through the movie, interacting with other characters. And sometimes you're like, why is this in the movie? This one less so than Nashville. It's based on a book, I think, about a noir detective. And it's definitely got like a kind of a light noir feel, I'd say, because it is in 1970. It's the early 70s. And Elliot Gould is a detective, or a private detective, that's kind of down on his luck. Like, at one point he's asked, are you gainfully employed? And I think he says, like, well, I try to be. And so he's not working that much, but in the middle of the night, pretty funny scene, he's woken up by his cat who wants food. There's no food, so he goes to the store, buys cat food. It's the wrong kind because they're out of the one his cat likes. He brings it home. He tries to trick his cat into eating it, which was funny because he puts it in the normal can, and then he's like, "Come here, kitty," and then he puts the food in it, and the cat won't eat it. He lives next to these like hot chicks, these like 5 hot chicks that are naked throughout half the movie, and they're like hippies, and they're into like meditation, and they make candles and brownies. He buys them brownie mix, 2 of them, and they're making magic brownies, and but then his friend shows up in the middle, right after he tries to feed his cat, and he's like, hey, and he has this scratch on his face, you can tell by a woman's hand, and he's like, hey, like, I need you to drive me to Tijuana. And then Elliot Gould's like, what, like now? And he's like, yeah, like right now. I need to get out of here. And he's like, well, what happened? Because he knows his wife. He thinks he loves her. He thinks, they just argue sometimes. And he's like, well, what happened? Was she scratch you? And then he's like, yeah, we got in this huge fight. I'm leaving. And I need to get to Tijuana. So he's like, oh, okay. So he drives him there, drops him off, and leaves. And this starts the whole this whole mess in the movie because he killed his wife, and and then the cops show up to his house the next day, and they're like, "Hey, where's your friend?" Because they know that they're good friends. He's like, "I don't know." He won't answer any of their questions, which I don't blame him. And they're like, "Did you give him a ride somewhere?" And he won't answer. So they take him in, they throw him in jail, and a few days later, they let him out, and they say, "Yeah, they in Mexico they found your friend and he's dead." So he's like, "What?" So he doesn't really. He's kind of questioning that, and then another aspect of the plot is there's this like gangster kind of who has working for him Arnold Schwarzenegger, who doesn't, I think, have one line in the movie. He's just in one scene. Very weird, bizarre scene. But Robert Altman, yeah, very different kind of guy, I would say. But good, solid director. It's just he's got a very strange kind of tone. But this gangster guy, and he says, "Yeah, your friend had like 350K of ours, and now that's gone, and we think you know where it is." And he's like, "I don't know." He's like, "I have no idea." And I think they know he dropped him off in Mexico. So they're like, "Well, we don't believe you. In fact, you need to go and find it, and if you don't, it will be bad for you." And so he's just kind of like, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about." There's a brutal scene in this movie where this he's like a Jewish gangster. I don't know, he's like a Jewish gangster, but then he also has like some Italian guys with him. He has Arnold, who's Austrian, and it's a multicultural gang, I guess. And this brutal scene where he goes up to Elliot Gould's house, his like apartment, and he brings in his girlfriend, the gangster. And then she's like, "Oh, can I have a Coca-Cola?" And he's like, "Okay." So they go and get a Coke, and then the guy just beats her with it, smashes it on her face for like no reason. And then he's like, basically like, "Look," he's like, I love this woman, and look what I did to her. What do you think I'm gonna do to you?" And I was like, is that really the best way to threaten people? It's like you threaten the guy by beating up your wife, who you supposedly love. Bizarre. I mean, I guess it just is a quick way of the movie showing how psycho this guy is, and he is. In a later bizarre scene, Elliot Gould goes to his house. The lady's has like, she's had plastic surgery. She's wearing this mask thing. And he's still like, "Where's the money?" He doesn't know. Earlier, he did get in the mail a $5,000 bill, which I didn't even know was a thing. It's a James Madison on it, I think. I was like, wow. That was sent by his friend. He got a $5,000 bill in the mail that was sent by his friend before he ended up dead. But he did, and he says to Elliot Gould, like, we should all, okay, you want to be honest with ourselves, and we'll all be honest. And he tells all of them to take off their clothes, all these gangsters. And that's the scene with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think this is like one of his first roles. Like a totally bizarre scene. He sees that he has a $5,000 bill. And he's like, "Oh, there was 3 of these bills in the 350K that your friend had." So this further makes him think that he has the money. But I mean, like, why would he have the? I don't know, because like it could just be like, look, he just dropped his friends off in Tijuana, and he has the money. Why wouldn't he steal the money? So I was always kind of like, why does he keep thinking he has the money? It doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, he thinks he has the money, and just a bizarre scene when they're all getting naked in this room. And then during that scene, someone's like, "Hey, come here," and the guy and the gang leader goes, and they have the. I think that they had the money because someone delivered the money, or some of the money. See, some things in this script I'm kind of like a little confused about. Nina Van Pallant, Eileen Wade, who's married to Roger Wade, and that's Sterling Hayden. And at first I didn't recognize him, but I was like, oh man, that's the guy in Doctor Strangelove. Because there's this whole other side plot where this guy, Sterling Hayden's character, is like crazy and an alcoholic, and he's in this facility for mental health, and he's getting like totally ripped off by this doctor. And then Elliot Gould shows up and takes him out of there, brings him back to his wife, and then he starts drinking again. His wife's like, if you don't stop drinking, I'm gonna leave you. So this is all spoilers. This movie's been out for a long time. It's an interesting movie. It's like an hour 50 minutes. I was never really bored. I just wasn't crazy impressed with the movie. Like, I've heard some people like love this movie. I've heard it referenced a lot. I don't know. I just thought it was okay, you know. Like, I just watched, which is I made a year later, 74, The Day of the Jackal. I think that's a way better movie than this, but they're totally different. But I think it's a better put together movie. Better script, better direction, I would say. But you know, Robert Altman is doing exactly what he wants to do, so you know, he is talented. But yeah, there's this whole plot with Sterling Hayden and his wife, and then later you find out that Sterling Hayden was having an affair with Elliot Gould's friend's wife, and then Elliot Gould thinks that Sterling Hayden killed his friend's wife, but later it's revealed he didn't. He just went there, and his Elliot Gould's friend finds out that Sterling Hayden's sleeping with his wife. Sterling Hayden leaves, and that's when the guy and his wife fight, and then you find out that the guy killed his wife. So his friend kind of screws over Elliot Gould, kind of drops him in the middle of like a, you know, like a fiery situation pretty much, and leaves him out to dry. I think that's why it's called The Long Goodbye, you know, because it's like a goodbye, but there's going to be a bunch of consequences for you helping me out here. And then so there's all of that going on, and then Nina Van Pallant, Sterling Hayden's wife, you could tell she's kind of flirting maybe a little bit with Elliot Gould, because Sterling Hayden's just like terrible to her, and he's very abusive. I'm not sure if he hits her, but you get the feeling maybe he would. Because he is not a stable person at all. He has a lot of mental problems. He drinks like all the time, and but yeah, then Nina Van Pat, she's, you know, kind of flirting with him. He keeps going over to her house. She makes him like this big dinner, you know, and he's like really good dinner. And then Sterling Hayden just gets up in the middle of the night, you know, hungover, and then just and then they have this, you know, he's like this famous author that can't write books anymore. He has writer's block, but he's like super rich. And he just walks into the middle of the ocean because it's right on the ocean. And yeah. And then the rest, so then as far as I could tell, she delivers at least some of the money to the gangster. I think. So then Elliot Gould wants to investigate his friend's murder. He goes to Tijuana, and he gets the feeling that there's something else happening here. There's corruption, because there's a lot of corruption in Mexico. It's just true. And then he tries to bribe them to tell them more about what happened, because there is photos of his friend dead. He doesn't really buy it, though. And in the end, he finds out that his friend is still alive in Mexico. And then Nina Van Pallant leaves Sterling Hayden, and she's gonna meet with him in Mexico. But then he says to Elliot Gould, you know, Elliot Gould's like pissed off because of all these things that have happened, and he basically says you're a born loser, and that's why I chose to do this to you. Elliot Gould just pulls out a gun and like blows him away. I was like, whoa. That's definitely the most hard-boiled detective part of the movie. But I was kind of like, so do they have the money? Because wouldn't that be the money you're gonna live off in Mexico? But who knows? Because Nina Van, she's driving there right after he kills her. He's walking down kills him. He's walking down the road. He sees her. So maybe she has a bunch of money because her husband is super rich. So I don't know. But yeah, then that's pretty much it. Sorry, sometimes I just like to kind of go through the plot because it just kind of lines it up in my head a little bit more. It is a nice kind of plot. There's a lot of twists and turns. Like I said, Elliot Gould's very good in it. I think he's a very good actor. He's a guy that is he always seemed on the cusp of making it big, but he just never did really. I mean, he's in a bunch of stuff, but he just never really made it that big. But Roger Ebert gives it 3 out of 4 stars. Yeah, I'd probably do 2.5. But yeah, he's the Long Goodbye attempts to do very interesting things. It tries to be all genres and no story, and it almost works. It makes no serious effort to reproduce the Raymond Chandler detective novel it's based on. Instead, it just takes all the characters out of that novel and lets them stew together in something that feels like a private eye movie. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That's kind of what I'm saying about him floating through the plot. The Private Eye is, I suppose, a fairly obsolete institution in our society. I'm not talking about divorce case specialists and the missing person guys. I'm thinking of the Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, Rose McDonald kind of hired eye whose occupation takes him into glamorous danger and who subscribes to a wary private credo. The Private Eye as a fiction device was essentially a way to open doors. The best novels of Chandler and others are simply hooks for a cynical morality. Yeah, I was thinking that, and also especially today, because I mean, a lot of the work would just be like on the internet now, like, you know, not exactly glamorous like you see like in the old Private Eyes in like the 40s and 50s, you know. It's just them probably finding people on the internet, you know, find this person, you find them on the internet, and then maybe you track them down in person. But Altman seems to understand this. He knows we don't care anymore about the plot than he does. He agrees with Hitchcock that it doesn't even matter what the plot is about as long as it's about something. I don't know if I agree with that, but The important thing is the way the characters spar with each other, but Altman has added a twist. Instead of making his private eye into a cool, competent professional, he makes him into a 1950s anachronism. Philip Marlowe has been in a lot of movies, and never one in which he was more confused than he is in this one. The story, or whatever you want to call it, involves a murder, a missing person, and an alcoholic writer with a bewitching blonde wife. There are also some gangsters and a cat, and the writer and his wife are played with really fine style by Sterling Hayden and Nina Van Pallen. Yeah, I agree. Sterling Hayden's one of the most interesting parts of the movie. I definitely thought. Because there's a part where when him and Elliot Gould just kind of sit down and have some drinks, and whenever Sterling Hayden was on stream, I was like, okay, this movie's picking up steam a little bit. It's getting a little better. Because he's just such an interesting actor who not only demonstrates that she can act, but also that a real woman is indefinitely more interesting on the screen than some starlet beauty school graduate who should be leading the pom-pom team. Yeah, but she's a beautiful woman too. I mean, so the middle of this mess is inhabited by Elliot Gould as a chain smoking. Yeah, he smokes so many cigarettes in this movie. It's crazy. Like, just constantly smoking cigarette. Like, almost in every shot, he's smoking a cigarette. Chain smoking, mumbling, disorganized Marlowe. It's a good performance, particularly the virtuoso 10-minute stretch at the beginning of the movie. When he goes out, to buy cat food. Yeah. Yeah, the first, 20 minutes of the movie's really good. Like, even though he's just buying cat food for his cat, I was like, this is interesting. Gould has enough of the paranoid in his acting style to really put over Altman's revised view of the private eye. Yeah, I like Gould's attitude. He's just kind of like, whatever. Like, you could tell he just doesn't really care about much. Altman doesn't string his scenes together to tell a taunt story, but he directs each scene as if he were. There's an especially memorable scene involving Philip Marlowe and a gangster played by Mark Rydell, who is usually a director. Oh, okay. The gangster smacks his girlfriend with a pop bottle, then snarls at Marlowe. Now that's someone I love. Think what could happen to you. Yeah, it's messed up. The scene sounds rather grim in print, I know, but in the movie it has a kind of hard-boiled desperation to it. It feels like it belongs in a private eye's life, and so does the whole movie, right up to the ending, which is really off the wall. I don't see why. The guy faked his death in Mexico. He paid off the cops. I think he still has most of the money. See, I was kind of unclear on that, but I don't know. So there's some things in the ending I didn't quite get, but I agree with everything he just said, though. And that's the article. It's a very short article, but yeah, he gave it 3 stars. Elliot Gould improvised a scene in police custody in which he smears fingerprint ink all over his face. That was pretty funny. Robert Altman decided that the camera should not stop moving and put it on a dolly. However, the camera movement would counter the actions of the character so the audience would feel like a voyeur. Elliot Gould had not worked in 2 years. Gould had been blackballed in the film industry due to his erratic behavior on the set of A Glimpse of Tiger, which eventually morphed into What's Up, Doc? But Roger Altman insisted on casting Gould in this film, served as a comeback. Oh. Maybe he was kind of hard to work with. I don't know, maybe that's why his career never took off that much. Because I definitely think he could have been more of a leading man, but Sterling Hayden wrote his own scenes. Marlowe always wears a tie with American flags on it. The tie looks plain red in the movie due to cinematographer's post-flashing techniques. In the commentary on the DVD, Robert Altman talks about how sad he was that Leah Brackett, the screenwriter, died before the film was released and never saw the completed work. In fact, Brackett died nearly 6 years after the film's release. What are you talking about? Shortly after completing the first draft of Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back for George Lucas. Oh, right. There's all of that. So she helped write that movie and then soon after died. I've heard of that. And thus lived long enough to see The Long Goodbye. And not long enough before her death, she wrote about working on the film. She was very pleased with it and was one of the relatively few veteran Hollywood screenwriters to have only praise for Robert Altman, whose good story mind she mentioned in interviews. John Williams and Johnny Mercer's title song crops up in various guises throughout the film. It's John Williams, including on the radio. I know this song just keeps, and honestly, I don't think it's a good song. I think like the guy that sings it sounds like he's like really drunk, and I can't get that song out of my head. Actually, it's like, but I really don't. I did not like that song, and it kept popping up throughout the whole movie, including on the radio as dirge played at the funeral by a Mexican marching band, and even as the first couple of notes at the Wade's door. Elliot Gould smokes in every scene. Yeah, okay, he does. Of the 5 movies actor Elliot Gould made with director Robert Altman, the film includes MASH, Nashville, The Player, California Split, and The Long Goodbye. He's in The Player. Oh, I forgot that. Cinematographer tried to approximate human vision through the post-production technique of exposing the underdeveloped negative to additional pure light, a technique called flashing, which literally dampens blacks and softens intense colors until they become pastel hues. It has an interesting look. Playing Jim Marlowe's friend Terry Lennox was a non-actor, former major baseball pitcher Jim Bouton, who is also the author of the best-selling book Ball 4. So, Morris the Cat first did his finicky routine in this film. I don't know what that means. In the opening scene, when Philip Marlowe and his cat came from a story a friend of Robert Altman's told him about a cat only eating one type of cat food. Altman saw it as a comment on friendship. If you could do me a favor, smash that like button. It'd be great. Really helps the channel. But yeah, The Long Goodbye. It's an interesting movie. It is a classic. I did like it, but I don't think it's perfect or anything. I definitely probably liked it about as much as Roger Ebert, maybe a little bit less though. I'd probably give it almost 3 stars. I'd probably say like 2.9 or 2.8 or something. This movie was part of the 1970s era revival cycle of pictures adapted from the novels by Raymond Chandler. The films included Marlowe, Chandler, The Big Sleep, The Long Goodbye. Oh wow. He wrote all those. Farewell, My Lovely, as well as a television version of Double Indemnity, which had previously been adapted by Chandler and Billy Wilder from a novel by James M. Cain. Then during the 1980s, there were further films of Cain adaptations with Butterfly and The Postman Always Rings Twice. Well, I've seen that. Postman Always Rings Twice. Sterling Hayden did not have to hit any camera marks on his scenes, so you just kind of let him do what he wanted. But yeah, that's about it though. Long Goodbye, Robert Altman, and starring Elliot Gould. So see you next time.